Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1093, 1093, Sunday, April the 5th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, we have a lot to get to today, so let's go ahead and get on it. First of all, don't forget to get your votes in the comments section of this video for your pick for Dumbass of the Week. Please try to get your comments in by 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the comments section of this video. Thank you. Now, I guess most of you have heard by now that President Trump has dragged another deep state swamp creature out of the mush pit. The pit of what you call it. But it's the swamp, we know that. And so another swamp creature has been dragged from the swamp thanks to President Trump. Yes, he's draining the swamp. So, Trump has fired the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, Michael Atkinson. Been waiting for this for a long time. This should have happened a long time ago, but I guess they're seizing the opportunity, which is very smart, and you'll understand more about that as we get farther into this video. And the cool thing about all this is that they told Atkinson on Friday morning that he had just been fired. Not only that, he was immediately placed on unpaid administrative leave for 30 days. So he's on unpaid administrative leave for 30 days, and then once he comes off leave, he'll be fired officially. Now, let's go through a bit of the bio of Michael Atkinson. Well, we know that in 2016, Michael Atkinson was the senior counsel to John Carlin, who's now a contributor for CNBC. And of course, John Carlin was the head of the DOJ, NSD, the National Security Division. And of course, we all know that John Carlin, prior to that appointment, was chief of staff to Uncle Bob, the executioner, Mueller. Now, Carlin played a major role in framing Michael Flynn and in overseeing the counterintelligence operation Crossfire Hurricane into the Trump campaign. John Carlin prepared the FISA application on Carter Page, but then he quit just before submitting it and went to work as a consultant for CNBC. Then, after he quits, he's replaced by Mary McCord, who then submitted the FISA prepared by Carlin, and of course, Michael Atkinson was the legal counsel to Mary McCord when she submitted that FISA application on Carter Page. Now, Carlin also, with Atkinson as a legal counsel, approved all of those 702 queries, 85% of which we now know were illegal, according to the FISA court judge, Rosemary Collier. Also, with Atkinson as the chief legal counsel, Mary McCord went with Silly Sally Yates to brief the White House counsel Don McGahn to warn them that General Flynn may have violated the Logan Act and risk being blackmailed by the Russians. McCord then resigned in May of 2017, and then she went to work for Lawfare. And she's serving as a staffer to Schiff's committee while she helped instigate the fake impeachment hoax over Trump's phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, likely working in close coordination with not just the whistleblower, but also with Michael Atkinson. Now, Atkinson also played a key role in the FISAs on Carter Page, two of which have now been deemed illegal by Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz. Atkinson went along with the counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign, despite the fact that he knew that the dossier was a Fusion GPS smear campaign paid for by the Right Reverend Clinton. Atkinson would have also known that Carter Page was an FBI CIA informant and not a Russian asset when he okayed the first FISA on Carter Page. Atkinson was literally working with Schiff, McCord, and Lawfare to use the coronavirus I should say, Atkinson is likely working with Schiff, Mary McCord, and Lawfare to use the coronavirus issue to have another investigation based on another fake whistleblower to get ready for another impeachment hoax coup. So there's just some of the background, and there's more, but I don't have that much time. I could spend an entire hour just talking about Atkinson's background because it goes back a ways. He has had an entire career as some sort of a legal counsel at various levels of the DOJ. So he's a deep stater through and through. Now, just some analysis here. It is hard to believe that Atkinson was fired without cause. As much as Trump dislikes Atkinson because of his role in the coup, usually when you're going to fire an inspector general, that's a position that the president appoints and then it's confirmed by the Senate. It generally has to be done for cause because there are various internal things that you generally have to go through, hoops you have to jump through. And, of course, if you fire that person, the president can fire that person, but they can also do various appeals back through the Department of Justice and various levels of the bureaucracy to try to make their case. So it's not like the president can just fire him and it's over. They do have some recourse. So you're generally not going to have a firing by somebody like this who has this ability to have recourse unless you're firing them with cause. So we have to assume at this point that even though Trump did not and probably could not specifically say what that cause was, he obviously has been given information that he can now be for sure that he had the rightful cause to fire Atkinson because he was firing him for cause. There was a reason to fire him. So it's likely Trump and Mark Meadows and people around him all know, including Attorney General Barr, that there was cause to fire Atkinson. Now we'll see what Atkinson's response is, whether or not he tries to challenge this or do anything. My guess is once he's told that he was fired for cause, and once he's given some information or his lawyers are given information on what that is, he'll probably back down and go away quietly. But he's likely going to be charged with crimes anyway by Durham. And it's not completely out of the question that possibly that the knowledge of his potential criminal activity and the reason, the cause for him being fired could have come from Durham's investigation. It might be Durham's investigation that uncovered the crimes of Atkinson, and that may be what gave cause for him to be fired. We haven't heard Attorney General Barr comment on it. We have heard Horowitz, but Horowitz, of course, is always going to sugarcoat everything. So while he didn't come out and say that the president was wrong to fire him, he gave pretty much of a glowing endorsement to Atkinson, saying what a fine job he did. Despite the fact that all the evidence we have from Horowitz himself proves just the opposite. But that's I.G. Horowitz. That's what he does. That's the business he's in. He is the cleanup man, the custodian. His job is to clean up the messes with as little attention to the problem as possible, to sweep things under the rug, and to keep the DOJ and the FBI looking somewhat above board, although it's nearly impossible to do at this point. So he's a cover-up artist, is what he is. That's what Huckleberry Horowitz does. Now, let's not forget that Mark Meadows is now Trump's chief of staff, and likely would have had a lot of input with Trump as to whether or not the time was right to fire Atkinson, and that likely would have been predicated on there being some cause. And of course, he's got Rick Grinnell over there as the acting OD&I. Now, it's possible that Rick Grinnell has seen the testimony of Atkinson, which the bug-eyed fool, Adam Schiff, has put on ice, basically sealed it, so that it couldn't be released to the public, and also it kind of puts a gag order on Republican members who attended those hearings. They're not allowed to quote anything from Atkinson's testimony, but they are allowed to generally talk about it. They just can't do direct quotes. And of course, we saw John Ratcliffe in the hearings when he brought up 3 or 4 points about Atkinson's testimony, where he essentially either refused to answer questions or essentially lied. So, or had to change things to cover his butt, basically. And Ratcliffe went through that in his questions. You can watch the video on YouTube. So, keep in mind that Jim Jordan, John Ratcliffe, and Mark Meadows were all in those impeachment hearings, and they heard Atkinson's testimony. So, we eventually will see that released, and I expect that as soon as the Republicans win back the House, likely in November, the very first thing that Nunes is going to do is unseal that testimony and release it to the public, by which time it may be irrelevant, because it's likely that Atkinson will have already been charged with crimes by John Durham by that time. Now, Rick Grinnell has announced already that the acting ICIG is going to be Colonel Thomas Monheim. He's a retired Air Force colonel and was legal counsel to the National Geospatial Interagency. And another thing that's not really being reported too much by the mainstream press is it wasn't just Atkinson who was given the boot. We also know that it's not just the appointment. Grinnell was announcing the acting ICIG is going to be Colonel Thomas Monheim, but also Trump is announcing or putting up for nomination 5 other inspector generals throughout the Inspector General Corps. Every department has an inspector general. So it's not just the change being made with Atkinson. There's also 5 other inspector generals who are going to be up for confirmation in the Senate. Now, at this point, it's up to Richard Burr to have that nomination for John Ratcliffe. Grinnell can only serve in that position as an acting for 6 months, and he's already been there for like 2. So in the next couple months or so, Burr is going to have them hearings and likely will nominate Ratcliffe. He'll likely be confirmed, especially because Burr is in no position to be a pain in Trump's ass right now, because he's got his own problems with dumping all that stock after getting a classified briefing on the issues regarding coronavirus. After going out publicly and telling people everything's going to be fine, he's dumping $1.7 million in stock. So he's got a lot of problems, and I assume that will probably be the end of him. I expect at some point that the pressure will be on him to resign. He becomes a very weak candidate to hold that seat. Now, in the state he's in, I think he's from North Carolina. We could do a lot better, certainly, but it's a seat that you could lose to a Democrat if you have a compromised Republican. So the best thing he could do for the party, and I'm pretty sure at some point they'll get around to this, is to have him step down. I don't know when he's up for re-election again. I don't know if he's up this coming election or when. I don't keep up with that too much in North Carolina. But we don't have to wait around for his term to end. He needs to go now. And I expect there'll be a lot of people pushing him in that direction. But I don't think he's going to put up any fight to get for the nomination of Ratcliffe. And in fact, they wouldn't have even gone forward with the nomination of Ratcliffe. Lindsey Graham would have told Trump whether or not the votes are there. And if the votes weren't there, they would have pulled his nomination. So that's all good. But yes, I think that there's some other stuff going on here. I don't think we're getting the full story. I think there's a lot of things going on in the background. And I do think that with Mark Meadows in there as chief of staff, he knows how things work in the swamp. And he knows that when you have a situation like this coronavirus, that you can get a lot of other things done behind the scenes. And so Mark Meadows has been pretty quiet. But my guess is he's doing a lot of things behind the scenes, obviously working with Rick Grinnell, obviously working with Ratcliffe, with Jordan. They know a lot about, they were in the hearings. They know what Atkinson's testimony is or was, and they know how devastating and damaging it is to him and to the government's case, or to, I should say, Schiff's case for impeachment. they may have other information about whether or not whatever cause or whatever they found out that made Trump feel comfortable enough to make this move right now. We don't know if that came from something emanating from John Durham's investigation or from an internal investigation, but certainly we haven't heard anything from Attorney General Barr, and you think that he might have commented if he thought there was a problem with it. We haven't heard anything, so it's possible that this is not happening in a vacuum, that this move, because Trump wanted to fire Atkinson, months ago, but he was obviously advised not to. There's some reason he has been advised that it's okay to do it now, and that tells me that they have cause. In other words, there's something going on. They've learned something about Atkinson, which makes them feel perfectly comfortable to make the move. So I think that we're going to later on down the road, we're going to find out there were other things going on that led to this decision. And we also know, as far as Atkinson's concerned, it's not just him, but we know his wife has a very close association with Mary Jacoby, the Glenn Simpson's wife. Of course, he's the owner of Confusion GPS. So there is a Confusion GPS connection for Atkinson's wife. She is also a government lawyer. And of course, something else about Atkinson, he would have been the legal counsel, the legal boss on the legal side to Kevin Kleinsmith. And Kevin Kleinsmith is the one who doctored the email regarding Carter Page being a FBI or CIA informant. Atkinson likely would have known about that. And of course, Kleinsmith is under investigation. And so it's possible that through the investigation into Kleinsmith, they determined that Atkinson was aware of what Kleinsmith did, and therefore that may be what has entangled him in, and that may have been what led to cause. We just don't know. That I'm guessing there. But we do know a little bit more from an article written in the Washington Examiner by Jerry Dunleavy about that little trip that John Durham made to Washington last week. And apparently he made the trip for two reasons. Number one, it was to make sure that his people working on the case in Washington, are on it and not using coronavirus to slack off or anything. He wants them going full tilt boogie. He doesn't want any backing off or slowing down. He's got a time schedule, obviously. He wants this wrapped up by the summer. And so one of the reasons he came to town was to make sure that coronavirus wasn't slowing down his investigation. And another reason he came to town was apparently we had already heard that there was some information that he needed to get from his people working in Washington having to do with some high-level targets. And we now know that one of those high-level targets, in fact, the specific high-level target that Durham was to be briefed on, and why one of the reasons he made the trip to Washington was Mr. Potato Head, John Brennan. Of course, we all know that Durham requested all the emails, schedules, and various other things from John Brennan back a couple of months ago. So it's my guess that they've received all those materials, reviewed all those materials, and they have something, information that they gained from that they need to share with Durham. And that's probably the main reason that he was in town. And of course, as Jerry Dunleavy says in the article, his sources are telling him that right now, this is where Durham is finding himself being very, very focused, is he's sort of landed on the intelligence community. This would include Clapper and Brennan and this community, whatever you want to call that. And that's where his main focus is right now. That's where the hook is, supposedly. And that's where they're really locked down right now into that. So, there you go. That is the update on Atkinson and other things regarding that. So, Yeah, I expect there'll be a lot of whining from the Bug-Eyed Fool and various others, but there's really not much they can do. The president has full authority to replace the inspector general, any inspector general, especially for cause. And I believe that's likely what we're going to find is the case. And, when you look at all the people that Trump has brought in and the way that he's draining the swamp over there, he's got Grinnell, he got Coates out of there, he's got Atkinson out of there. Of course, he cleaned out these CIA hacks at the National Security Division over there. So he is draining the swamp, and probably a lot of things going on behind the scenes right now that we don't know about because coronavirus is pretty much sucking up all the oxygen in the room. And so they're probably, with Mark Meadows there, they're probably taking advantage of that and getting a lot of things done as it pertains to draining the swamp. And of course, the firing of Atkinson led to another crazy tweet from Mr. Potato Head himself, and just basically calling for people to vote Trump out and that sort of thing. Brennan obviously feeling the heat because he probably was well aware of that article that came down on Friday from the Washington Examiner, at the Washington Examiner by Jerry Dunleavy, which goes into pretty decent specifics on exactly what they're looking at in regards to John Brennan. And one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, that Durham came into town. And because that article was widely distributed, it was written originally on Washington Examiner by Jerry Dunleavy, but it was picked up and linked over on Real Clear Investigations. You could Google it, and it was 10 straight pages of just about everybody picked up that article and reran it, including the New York Times, the Daily Beast, and everyone else. So that article got a lot of play. And no doubt that Mr. Potato Head read it himself, and he's feeling the heat. Well, it appears that the prosecutors, now the Department of Justice prosecutors, are now asking for another delay in the Flynn sentencing case. Of course, this is the whole time that's going on. We have this U.S. attorney who's looking into this entire thing. The DOJ wants 3 more weeks to buy a little time, and that is to try to respond to the latest court filing by Sidney Powell. Of course, she's filing which called for the case to be dismissed, and it included a lot of information and a lot of handwritten notes and things like that, which the DOJ says they need time to review. So I think, again, this case is going to be dismissed. I'm not sure what the progress is being made by this U.S. attorney that's reviewing it. Attorney General Barr put this U.S. attorney, I think from Arkansas, I believe, who's looking into it. At some point, he's going to have some sort of a finding, but this is going nowhere. And I don't know why Trump just doesn't pardon Flynn and be done with it. Just pardon him and be done with it. Maybe he's being advised politically that that's not the right thing to do, and maybe let it play itself out. But, I don't know. I would just pardon him and just do away with it. This thing's gone on way too long. Spent a fortune trying to prosecute Flynn for nothing. It's turning into a freak show, which it always was. Well, of course, Trump was asked about this fourth bill, which I hope doesn't happen, fourth stimulus bill, and about Madam Botox trying to get this mail-in voting, whether or not he would support something like that. The old Trump is back. So for the last 2 weeks, he's been trying to be nice to the gaggle of reporters at the White House. He's tried to be nice to them, but I've noticed the last 2 days, now he's back to the good old Trump again, kicking ass. And not taking any crap from these people. The last 2 days, he's been on a roll. And he's been chewing a lot of ass. And so his response to that was, of course, no, he's not going to support or sign on to this mail-in voting. And he says, yeah, because it's just the Democrats, they'll use that as a way to cheat. Exactly. And also in that press briefing, Trump talks about the fact that he's now in the process of setting up this second task force, which he expects to be open for business on Monday. And their job is going to be starting to work on how to go about reopening the country. Yes, it's time to reopen the country. I've seen enough. We were told a week ago that the next 2 weeks were going to be the shit. So we've been watching in this past week around here where I am, and from what many of you put into the comments section when I asked you a couple of days ago what things look like in your neck of the woods, it looks like what's going on in my neck of the woods, which is not a whole lot. And so I think that this upcoming week will be the second week of the 2 weeks they said with the shit was going to hit the fan. All we can see, these numbers are not hitting the models. And of course, then we just had Fauci tell us, well, we really can't trust the models. Yes, the models we've been trusting to shut down the economy, we can't trust. So that's good news. So anyway, yes, they are getting ready to reopen the economy. And I would think that by the end of this coming week, if by this coming Friday, we don't see this gigantic explosion of new cases and all this sort of stuff, or a higher percentage of people dying, I believe that Trump is going to give the go sign to go ahead and start reopening the country. I think there's a few hot spots that we are looking at, which is like New York. California seems to be leveling off now. But New York, Michigan, Louisiana, there's a couple hot spots in Florida down around Miami and the southern part of the state. So there's like 5 or 6 states right now that kind of have hot spots going on. I think that what they're going to do is take a look at the country, pretty much county by county, work with the governors to start giving certain counties the ability to go back to normal, and then isolate the last few states and counties where we have a real problem, and try to do some sort of an isolation to keep it from spreading outside those counties, and then work the problem from within those counties, shift all the resources there, and try to nip this thing in the bud. I think that that would be the prudent thing to do. We need to get the country back going again. We can see that there are other countries like Sweden and Brazil, places like that, where they have not had these massive lockdowns and shelter in place and all these other things shutting down their economy, and their death rates are no higher than ours. And the reason why that we show so many more numbers of people being infected is because we've done so much more testing. But as far as the metrics, as far as the percentage of people dying, or the types of people who are dying, it's a lot of people who are obese, overweight, diabetic, and these things run in common. Generally, when you find someone who's really bad diabetic, they're also overweight, and in many cases obese. They kind of go hand in hand. Diabetes and being overweight have a tendency to go in hand. You hardly ever see a real skinny person with diabetes. It's possible, but most of the time it's people who are quite overweight. But it's generally this group of people who are quite unhealthy, have respiratory issues already, have asthma, they're elderly, they have heart conditions. It's generally this group of people in our country who are have these health issues already, and when they get hit with this, it hits them worse and ends up causing most of the deaths. And of course, we have a couple different treatments now being used that are showing really good results. We're getting more and more results from that. The hydroxychloroquine is showing great results now. The media hates to admit it because Trump came out and said we should be looking at that, and of course they poo-pooed it, and now of course it's proving to be Trump was proven to be exactly correct. Even Dr. Fauci is having to admit that it's starting to look pretty good. So, and I've heard enough from Dr. Fauci. I'm pretty much done with him. Dr. Birx, I'm good. I've heard enough. We've seen your models. They suck. We shut down the economy when we probably shouldn't have. And now I think it's time to get back to work and put these people back into the bureaucracy where they belong, and let them create some more problems for the underlings around them. So there you go. Now, I don't know how many of you saw this video that Ocasio-Cortez, the wild-eyed commie, put up on her live Instagram. She did a live Instagram. It's hilarious as hell. You got to watch it. She's actually complaining. Of course, she's always complaining about something, and she's complaining that we're not doing enough to provide relief to people. And the whole time that she's doing this, she's in the process, as she's talking and complaining about us not doing enough, she is in her apartment there mixing up a margarita, and while simultaneously complaining about why we're not doing enough, she's giving you instructions on how to make a margarita. Remember, she was a bartender. She probably makes a pretty mean margarita. So she's making a margarita, giving you instructions, telling you as she goes along what she's doing, and in the middle of that, she's also complaining about why we're not doing enough to provide relief to people suffering from the virus. And the best thing that we could do is relieve the people of their liberal governments. Because if you look at the problem, it's the worst problems we see are places where you have liberal governors like Cuomo, who botched it pretty bad, and liberal mayors like Comrade de Blasio, who botched it really bad, and liberal idiots like Madame Botox, whose city is a shithole. So, yep, that's pretty much what we learn. You generally going to have a lot rougher time if you have a liberal running your city or your state when something like this happens. They're whining and crying and complaining while Trump is solving their problems for them. That's what it looks like to me. Well, hey, Joe Rogan said if Biden's a nominee, he'd probably vote for Trump over Biden, and that's saying something because I don't think that Rogan is a big fan of Trump. But yeah, he said that he would vote for Trump over Biden, and that's getting a tremendous amount of play, as you can imagine. Then, of course, we have Commie Bernie out there. Yes, he's still in the race, and he says it's not crazy to suggest that Trump will not leave office if he loses. Well, he's not going to lose, Bernie, because you ain't going to beat him because you ain't even going to be the nominee. Even if you do try to break off and run third party or something, you're going to lose even worse because you'll split the Democratic Party, which is split anyway. No one's going to vote for Burisma Joe. He's out of his mind, and it's not going to get any better. It's going to continue to get worse. Cuomo is no better. He's probably, actually maybe worse. So, yes, that is a crazy thing to suggest, Commie Bernie, that Trump would not leave office. First of all, he's not going to lose, but if he did, he would leave office. Now, we had Pelosi galore over there on MSNBC, and she was asked about, she was in an interview talking about coronavirus, and she said that, quote, the threat posed by coronavirus was self-evident while impeachment was going on. Huh, that's kind of like a cell phone, isn't it? Here she is saying that the threat posed by coronavirus was self-evident while impeachment was going on. She's basically saying, oh yeah, well, we knew all about coronavirus while impeachment was going on. She's commenting about the fact that Mitch McConnell dragged her by saying, hey, well, we got a late start on coronavirus because we were distracted with Pelosi's impeachment. So she's saying, well, the threat that was posed by coronavirus was self-evident while impeachment was going on. Oh, really? Oh, really? Well, if that's the case, then why would the demo-commies continue to focus on removing the president when they knew they were about to face a pandemic? And especially an impeachment case that they knew they were going to lose before they even started. Now, I think Biden has walked into a trap here. As many of you know, Kellyanne Conway gave a press conference this past Thursday or Friday, and she suggested that if Joe Biden, instead of sitting there tweeting things out about the president, that if he actually has any good ideas, that he should call the president himself and let him know what those ideas are. She said Trump would be more than happy to take Biden's call and if he has any good ideas. So and of course, in response to that, Biden was then asked about Kellyanne's comment, and he said, "Oh yeah, we heard about that, and in fact we've already jumped on it. And right now my people are working with Trump to come up with a way that I can get in contact with him, so I can tell him my thoughts on the issue." Well, you don't need to do a lot. All you do is pick up the damn phone. He knows how to get hold of Trump. He could call him on the phone right now. But if I was Trump, you know what I would do with Biden? I would bring Biden to one of these daily press briefings. Oh, yes, I'd bring Biden to the press briefing. I said, well, since we're all here, I know Joe said he has some good ideas, so I'm going to bring Joe up to the microphone right now and let him tell all of us and me and all of us what some of his ideas are, some of the things that we should be doing. I'd bring him up there and put him right to the microphone and let him rip. And that would be the end of his campaign, right there. Do it, Mr. President. It will be a blast, and it will end his campaign. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. Don't forget Dumbass of the Week. See ya. Bye.